Now we move on to a client agency case study about collaboration and innovation in a sharing economy, which of course is our theme at this year's Transformation Conference. Please welcome CMO Airbnb, Jonathan Mildenhall. Jonathan started his career as a graduate trainee in 1990 at McCann Erickson, and over the next 15 years, he rose rapidly through the ranks of the London ad industry. He really is one of us. And in 2006, Jonathan joined the Coca-Cola Company as VP Global Advertising Strategy, and he led the introduction of Coca-Cola's global marketing platform, Open Happiness, which was the most awarded promotion that they have done in their history. Jonathan joined Airbnb in June 2014 as their CMO. And Lisa Donohue will be chatting to him, has established a career of innovation, creative action, client service, and leadership. As CEO of Starcom USA, she's driving a true next-generation media agency focused on the convergence of media, technology, and creativity, enabling the design of unique human experiences at scale. Thank you both for being here, and welcome to the stage.
Excellent. Well, welcome.
Hello.
And we are both very excited to be here today and to share a little bit of our story, and importantly, I think, build on some of the themes that have really been put out there this morning. So certainly we all know we are in an era of incredible change. And in fact, you might think about it as velocity marketing. We have empowerment increasing ever more on the side of the consumer. We have convergence increasing in terms of screens, in terms of business models. Consumers are moving with pace and purpose, and companies and brands like ours need to move at that same pace and purpose of consumers. Now, new establishment brands, I think, are really leading that forefront. And Airbnb is one of the forefront of new establishment brands and the forefront of the sharing economy. So I think it's very representative of the changes that we need to make as an industry. So Jonathan, why don't we start, and why don't you talk a bit about the trajectory that Airbnb has been on, where it has been, and where it's going for the future?
Yeah, sure. Airbnb is not even 7 years old, and the first 4 years of Airbnb's lifetime, it took 4 years for us to get 1 million guests to travel on Airbnb. Now we've had 30 million guests traveling on Airbnb, and we have about 1 million guests a month traveling on Airbnb. So the growth has just been phenomenal. It's exceeded everybody's expectation. And what's beautiful about that growth is that it's a double-sided marketplace. So the more hosts we get offering up their homes, makes the proposition more attractive to a wider group of guests. And the more guests that travel on Airbnb because of word of mouth, the more dynamic and higher profile the overall brand. But I joined Airbnb just 9 months ago, nearly 10 months ago, to really help mainstream both the host community and also the guest community. And it was at that time that I looked to the marketing services industry for partners that were going to help me really mainstream the Airbnb proposition, and hence our relationship with Starcom.
Yes. Now, previous to Airbnb, you were working with a very iconic brand, and now you're shifted to actually building a brand and in a new economy. So how have you changed your behaviors, your perspective? What did you bring from previous, but what did you also realize that you needed to either learn new or fresh?
It's a great question, because I had absolutely no real understanding of the difference between a huge multinational corporate company and a hypergrowth startup company. And, at my previous company, we'd be satisfied, eking out a 5-6% volume growth on an annual basis. At Airbnb, we are a hypergrowth company that is trebling in size each and every year. And so the mindset of a hypergrowth company is really, really quite incredible. You still need to go through the same rigorous strategic planning, rigorous creative development, establishing the right kind of measurement methodology, but you have to do it in breakneck speed. What's beautiful about a company like Airbnb is from time that it takes to conceive an idea to actually put it into market and actually testing it is really a matter of weeks. And that means that the mindset that I have and all of my partners have is as real time as it can possibly be.
Mm-hmm. And so actually, why don't you talk a little bit, so you were new in the role and you needed to establish partners because there was nothing really in place, and it was yours to pick the partners that you would need across creativity, across data, across media. And you had a very different approach and sort of the order in which you chose partners. So why don't you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, it was, I joined in June of last year, and I took a look at the outline business plan for 2015. And I realized that there was no way that I was going to be able to help position marketing as a driver of growth for Airbnb unless I moved quickly to appoint some partners that were going to help me build the right systems and the right kind of processes, not just here in the US, but all around the world. And so I knew that I needed a media partner, and I also needed a creative agency partner. What I decided to do is that we would appoint without pitch Starcom. I'd had experience working with Starcom at the Coca-Cola company, and Starcom have a global footprint and a really progressive mindset when it comes to client partnership, but most importantly, creative collaboration. And then I moved to the creative side of the business, and I went through a competitive pitch. And we appointed Starcom literally within a matter of days. It's a hypergrowth company, and there is no need to stand around debating when you know what you have to do. And what was beautiful about the way that Starcom approached the business is they basically set up camp. Bearing in mind that I'm new, within 3 weeks of me joining the company, they set up camp at Airbnb. And they did that because they wanted to accelerate their understanding, not just about our business, but also about our culture. They wanted to accelerate their understanding about the founders of Airbnb and how the founders think. And so what was beautiful about Starcom is Starcom actually accelerated my understanding of Airbnb and what some of the drivers of culture and some of the drivers of business were. And then Starcom and myself formed a partnership to manage the creative pitch. And again, what was beautiful about that is Starcom had a lot of time independent of Airbnb with a number of the creative agencies that we were pitching. And my brief to Starcom was, all I'm interested in is if we can learn things creatively from the creative agency, but most importantly, if they can collaborate creatively, because Starcom has such an amazing wealth of creative talent within the Starcom network, and I wanted to make sure that the creative agency instinctively understood how to collaborate with Starcom. And so the decision to appoint the creative agency happened within about 2 months of myself joining Airbnb and within about 6 weeks of Starcom being appointed by Airbnb. And the decision was actually a joint decision between myself and Starcom.
Yeah, which has been, a great process. As Jonathan said, and you can get a sense here, cultural fit becomes very important in forming a partnership with how a new establishment brand operates. I mean, you've heard about speed, hyper speed, hyper growth. So, we couldn't come in with a lot of process, and here's how long it takes to do, X, Y, and Z, which is sort of a classic older agency kind of setup is, well, we have process and we know how marketing is done and we're going to put the process in place. And brands like you guys are far from that, and you're like, we need to go. So culture became a big important, and the leadership that was put in place. Mm-hmm. And I think that you would say that the leaders, particularly Andrew and Bob and Sean, that we put in place are a good fit with your folks.
Totally. The 3 leaders that Starcom have running our business, all incredibly strategic. They're incredibly passionate about our business, actually. They genuinely believe in the kind of cultural purpose of Airbnb. But the thing that I'm most impressed with is they just have an amazing ability to either create their own ideas and then add fuel through collaboration, or take other people's ideas and make sure that those ideas actually grow in size and grow in scale before we actually implement them. Again, it's important to state, it's not just a US thing. After appointment, I took everybody around the world for basically 4 weeks, literally 4 weeks, to Europe and to Asia and then back to the Americas to work with my local offices to make sure that the strategic potential of the core creative idea for 2015 wasn't just an agency thing or a San Franciscan thing. We actually put fingerprints and ideas of 150 people around the Airbnb system all over the work. And watching the way that Starcom and Chiat, the creative agency, actually collaborated with people all across the Airbnb system, regardless of status or discipline or length of tenure within Airbnb, was a remarkable thing. For a marketer that comes from a more traditional approach to agency management, I was incredibly inspired by the fact that everybody, whether it was Chiat, whether it was Starcom, and of course Airbnb, we all have this hypergrowth startup, incredibly ambitious mindset.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely have to have that entrepreneurial and inventor. And that is, as we put the leaders in place, these were inventors and creators, much like, all of you guys are, and certainly the founders of the company. One of the things that we learned quickly is, for these guys, there's no hurdle they can't clear. There is no wall that they cannot break down to get to that hyper growth. And we have to have that same kind of mindset of our people. And in fact, of the leaders on our business, there's not a one of them that is actually a media planner, right? I've got, business strategists, business integrators. I've got, experienced designers, because we are not building a media plan, right? We are building a brand.
That's exactly right.
Exactly, and we need to think that way. And that mindset, I think, has allowed us to have the strong partnership with Chiat, because we are both working creatively to get the right message out to consumers to build the brand.
That's right.
So why don't we talk a little bit about what the brand stands for and belonging, and so where us together with Chiat are going in the future.
So I was a business studies student and I majored in marketing. I've studied brands and brand strategy for nearly 30 years. And I admire and respect the likes of Nike and the likes of Levi's, the likes of Coca-Cola, who have these strong cultural ideologies at the heart of the brand. So when I sat with Brian Chesky, my chief exec, and he started to talk to me about his vision of a world where Airbnb was really facilitating a world of belonging for all 7 billion people, I thought, belonging. Belonging is as important a kind of cultural ideology as happiness is to Coke or human potential is for Nike. And yet we're a new brand. We're 7 years old, and it's a new kind of concept in marketing to create a world where you can belong. And we have this community, the community of nearly 30 million people. And it's our incumbent responsibility, Starcom, Chiat, Airbnb, to unlock the strategic and creative potential of the community. I mean, we're one of the world's biggest story-doing platforms, but with the help of our agencies, we can turn that into a great storytelling platform. And what was really, really interesting was my own experience. I was 47 years old when I joined Airbnb last year. And I remember my first day as the new kid on the block at Airbnb. All I desperately wanted was to feel a sense of belonging. How long will it take before Airbnb accept me? How long will it take before I truly understand Airbnb? How long will it take before I feel that I'm a genuine member of the executive team? And so I realized on my first day how important belonging is, because it's something that we all feel. Each and every day, we're looking for relationships that confirm that we belong as individuals. And I was looking for a partnership with my agencies that also believed in that ideology and could help us bring that ideology to the mainstream. And that's what I found with Starcom.
Yeah, and I think that what that reinforces, one, obviously such a powerful insight and very timely, right, to be able to use, in terms of the world today and where people are and how they feel about things. It's wonderfully timely to leverage that. But that's not something that you necessarily communicate with quote unquote traditional advertising and media versus content and content assets and experiences. So maybe you want to talk a bit about some of the experiences we've all been working on.
Yeah, and that's absolutely right. You cannot say that you're committed to a world where all 7 billion people can belong if it's just a one-way conversation. It has to be a two-way, three-way, dynamic conversation. And experiential marketing is a cornerstone of Airbnb. And so you may have seen recently the wonderful campaign that we've got running in all media. It's a PR-driven campaign. It's an experiential-driven campaign where guests can stay in one-off spectaculars like a ski lift in Courchevel, or a night at IKEA in Sydney, or a night at Galeries Lafayette in Paris. Creating these experiences where the core target audience genuinely can experience what it's like to belong in places where they previously not considered being able to stay is a cornerstone of Airbnb's marketing. And you'll see as we start to break into more mainstream media later this year, how the promise of the Airbnb experience is creating access for everyone.
Why don't you then talk a little bit too in terms of, how you see potentially adjusting the story as we move ahead, or being agile within some of the messaging. Because again, kind of in a more traditional format, we put content and messaging out there and it's sort of set for a while, but we're in a much more dynamic world. So how do you think about even keeping agility with the messaging and the content?
Yeah, I mean, the great thing about a community-driven super brand, which is what we want to be, getting the energy of the community to be a driver of the company's marketing agenda is key to us all. And that means that we need to be able to respond real time to ensure that we really are seen as sensitive to pop culture and cultural mores all around the world. Now, we need ongoing and robust and long-term measurement. That's really, really important. And we do need to make sure that we're incredibly rigorous with the strategic planning. But the core creative that sits on top of all of that does need to be able to change almost real time. And what Starcom and Shire have been able to do with us is help plot some of the cultural milestones in any market over the course of a 12-month calendar, and help us kind of preempt a little bit some of the shifts that we need to make, but also help us use real-time data so that we can amplify those ideas that are actually catching on, and put greater investment behind those ideas, and quickly move on from those ideas that are not necessarily catching the imagination of either our community or a broader target audience.
I really love what you say in terms of emphasizing the blend. I think that most people in this room and the marketers we deal with feel a lot more right now the pressure for short-term results and short-term decisions. A lot of times pressured by competitive situations and also pressured by Wall Street. But while those are important, you build brands by having a look at longevity and strategy and leveraging insights. And that's still something that's important to Airbnb, even as a new establishment brand.
Absolutely. The long-term health of the Airbnb brand is so important because we have super brand status. So we're looking at the likes of Disney, and we're looking at the likes of Apple, and we're looking at the likes of Nike, and understanding how those brands created such universal long-term ideology, but the velocity of the company means that we want to do next year what it took some of those brands a decade to do. And so being long-term as far as the strategic agenda is concerned, and real-time as far as the day-to-day marketing agenda is concerned, is exactly the formula for our success.
Yeah. So again, we've talked a lot about change and agency models changing and business models changing. What advice would you give to the folks in the room here from your experience, again, going from iconic brand to Airbnb? What advice would you give them as they tackle this new world order and changing how they build their partnerships with peer agencies as well as with marketers?
My one frustration with the industry, marketing, advertising, and media, there isn't enough trust and respect within the client-agency relationships. And I don't know how agencies can be encouraged to think in a really innovative and fresh way and chart new ideas and cross new territories if clients don't respect that innovation agenda and trust the agencies. And what I was really, really grateful for is when we first met, Lisa, and you said to me, Jonathan, all I ask for you is that you will always be brutally honest about the way you're feeling about our relationship and the people who are working on the business. Because if we discuss the undiscussable, we can achieve anything together. Mm-hmm. And that's what I think of the industry. We can achieve anything together, providing we trust and respect one another.
Well, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.